What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and today I got a little bit of a tutorial here for you. We're going to be dealing with recording your footage on PC, and then later on I'm going to be getting into making commentaries, rendering out that video, including render settings that work for YouTube, or at least what I've been using and works for me. So first portion is going to pertain strictly to PC players. Second portion is going to pertain to pretty much everyone. If you have a console and you record your videos, through whatever device you're recording with, I'm still going to show you how you render out those videos in Sony Vegas. First off, let's talk about Fraps. This video is going to be recorded in Fraps because Fraps has the ability to record your desktop, which is what I'm doing right now. I don't usually use Fraps anymore because basically Fraps has the nasty habit of capping your frame rate at 30, 60, or 90 frames per second, which while you're gaming is not a good thing, because what I found with Battlefield 3 is when this first became apparent to me was basically I'd hit 60 frames per second and hold it, but then there was an explosion or something, the front of a building came off on same crossing, and your frame rate dips just a little bit because it's naturally going to happen when you have a intensive graphical thing going on screen. Fraps would lock it down to 30, and no matter what was going on, even if I was staring at the spawn screen, it would not come up to 60, which personally, I can't play with 30 frames per second, or at least I can't play the way I play with 30 frames per second because it just doesn't work. Fraps also splits the files every 4 gigabytes, which neither of those problems happen with Dxtory, as well as the fact that Fraps gives you basically just one audio track. So if you record your commentary as well as you're playing a game, you're going to get one audio track, so you have to change the volume level of the game itself so that way you can hear your voice. Whereas with Dxtory, it'll give you the game sound on one audio track and the microphone on a separate audio track, so you can change the volume levels and mix them around and get that perfect balance of game audio and commentary. So first off, we'll start with Fraps. Fraps is pretty much the basic program everybody knows about. Pretty simple setup, as simple as it's going to be. But again, it does have some drawbacks, but it's really simple, straightforward to use. No hassle. So first off, your video capture hotkey, whatever, put it on whatever you want to, but I would strongly suggest you use a shift or control key, because you don't want a game using up your button, because some games actually do use the home key. At least some games I do play. But video capture settings, 30 versus 60 frames per second. 30 frames per second is just fine for a commentary. 60 frames per second, obviously, if you're doing a montage, is much better because you can do slow motion and everything and get better quality. But I usually record in 30 frames per second, at least with Battlefield 3, but I'll go into that later. Half size versus full size, it kind of depends. Originally I recorded in half size because there really wasn't much quality difference, because remember, YouTube will poop on the quality, and no matter how good it looks on YouTube, it's always going to be reduced down and just be changed around. So don't go to extreme lengths to get every last drop of quality, because you're not going to get it in the end product anyways. At least if your end product is YouTube. Two settings over here is obviously the record external input. That's basically just setting up your microphone, as well as you can make it push to talk basically by using this only capture while pushing, which hide mouse cursor in video, that's not really a big option, but obviously it just kind of depends on what you're doing. For something like this, we want to make sure that's unchecked. But that's going to be pretty much that for Fraps. Again, really simple, straightforward. You don't need to worry about a whole lot. But let's go on to Dxtory, because it's a better program in my opinion, because the quality is exactly the same basically versus Fraps, but it gives you separate audio tracks, which is huge. The frame rate that you are playing at is separate from the basically the recording frame rate, unlike Fraps, or if it does drop a little bit, it'll drop down to 30, because I guess that's something to do with the refresh rate or something, similar to VSync, which I don't know. I don't understand it, but just know that there is a difference. Basically on Dxtory, I can get like 120 frames per second. If I drop down to like 119 or something, my frame rate just doesn't go crazy and just like cap itself at like 90 or something, which is what it does with Fraps, which is really annoying. So anyways, pretty much simple here. You'll see here at the top, profiles. Dxtory will create multiple profiles for anytime you start up a game. So this is just my Battlefield 3 profile. Go in here to this folder. That basically tells you the game, or the program, excuse me, where it's going to save its files. As you can see, you just uncheck this box, so that way it uses its own separate setting, and then basically you're just going to tell it where you're recording to. That's just going onto my second hard drive into the Battlefield 3 folder. And then every video from Battlefield 3 will automatically go in there, separate and be its own entry, as well as, you know, just go over to Bad Company 2. Bad Company 2 has its own folder, so they're separate automatically. Really nice feature. Really, really nice feature. Then we'll go over to the codecs here, and again, we can uncheck this use default setting to give it its own unique setting, you know, on a per program basis, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later here. Codec, I've used 2 codecs. This Dxtory video codec is by default included in Dxtory. For the quality that you access just by hitting this little button, doesn't really matter. Again, YouTube's going to screw over the quality anyways. I haven't seen too terribly much difference in file size between low quality and high quality. True quality does look a little bit better, but you get files that are ginormous, which, you know, again, for YouTube, you're not going to notice the difference. I always was using compress, but again, I didn't really notice too terribly much of a difference in the final product in terms of compressed versus uncompressed. So that's that. Going over to the Lagarith, though, and be warned, with the Dxtory codec, you will get huge file sizes anyways. I mean, very huge. We'll go with the Lagarith, which is what I use now. It's an add-on codec. I'll put a link in the description, or you can just go ahead and Google it. Just click on the settings, use multi-threading if you have a multi-core CPU, which I do, and the mode, I just leave at default. Haven't messed around with it and entered anything, which, you know, it just works, so I'm not going to worry about it. But you'll see here, frame rate is over on the right-hand side. I record Battlefield 3 at 30 frames per second because I can't record at 60 frames per second as nicely as I'd like, which means frame drops. When you actually are recording in Dxtory, in the corner that you have specified over here, for me the upper left hand corner, you'll basically see 2 frame rates. One is the video frame rate, one is the recorded video frame rate, which, you know, you need to make sure when you're recording at 30 frames per second it stays at 29 to 31, or if you're doing 60 it stays at 59 to 61, because otherwise you'll get what are called frame drops, which are basically just little stutters in the video that, you know, are annoying. Anyways, another real nice thing about Dxtory here is scaling, which, you know, obviously 175, 50%, which is the size that you're recording, which is the equivalent of Fraps with the full size, half size recording. Only you got a middle option or a completely custom option if you choose. If I wanted to record at 77% size, I could, but that's not what I use. You can use that, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also size, which is a much better option, much better option. I play in 1080, 1920 by 1080, but I actually record in 1280 by 720, which, you know, gives me a 720 raw file. Doesn't affect the way I play, doesn't change the resolution I have to play in, just automatically records in that. I don't need to upsample it, I don't lose any quality because of that. You know, the file sizes aren't too terribly different, and, you know, it just works slightly better, which, you know, that's a nice option to have, really nice option. Another big plus for Dxtory, though, is the audio settings, which, you know, I have used default because I don't need to change this on a per game basis. Basically, your first track is going to be whatever your speakers are. I always play with the headsets, so it's set up that way. So just record sound on audio track 1, and then if I go over to audio track 2, and, you know, you basically click this little plus sign to audio track, excuse me. This is how you add in your microphone. You know, select your microphone. Make sure you go ahead and test it out and everything. Make sure everything's running right before you start doing a commentary or something, you know, or a live commentary, which is what you'd use this for. Because otherwise you'll record it and then you'll be like, oh hey, I totally set that up wrong, and you'll have no voice, or your audio settings for the game audio will be completely messed up, and you'll just be like, argh. So that's going to be that. I don't think there's really anything more. Processing threads, make sure you change that to what is ever relevant. Usually you should probably cut the number of CPU or cores in your CPU in half, just because I think that works a little bit better, because most games don't use every single core on your CPU anymore, or yet. We'll see. Every now and then you'll have a couple of problems where Dxtory just doesn't quite like the program. I've had some issues with Crisis Wars, where I've had to actually disable native write memory, which supposedly smooths things out, a little bit less of an issue. But again, leave that unchecked unless you have an issue. Everything else, though, pretty much is that's pretty much everything for the programs. Now let's go ahead and talk about making an actual video here. Okay, so I know what this is, so I'm going to open this up, because let's see, right click, open with Vegas. Vegas Pro 10 is what I'm using. Pro 11 should be pretty much the same. HD Movie Studio is about the same as well. So let's go ahead and make a selection here. So I'm just going to click right underneath this blue bar here. And then I'm just going to drag this black bar, and I'm going to look around for what I have. Want to get that, yes. Reapers, we have dismissed that claim. Anyways, first thing you're going to do whenever you bring a video into Sony Vegas is right-click in the video track. Then you're going to go right-click, switches, disable resample, and you can see the difference in quality that made. Basically, resample is blending the previous frame with the frame after the frame that you currently have selected together to try and make the video smoother, but usually it fails miserably and just looks like crap, so turn it off every single time. You'll see right here just a little basic intro. This is your video track, your audio track. This is the game audio, and because this is recorded in Dxtory, this is my microphone audio. But this wasn't a live commentary or anything, so this is pretty much blank, except for a couple of things where I'm coughing into the microphone or something, and it just picked that up. So we'll just go ahead and select this. We'll just drag our thing over to the right here, and you can see me totally run that guy over. That was pretty awesome. And then blow up their stuff. Yeah! Yeah! Anyways. So now that I got my selection, you just make it by dragging. I'll just show you how to do a commentary here. Not going to be doing one for this video, obviously. This commentary is recorded through Fraps, through that record microphone input. But for this one here, for post commentary, I use Audacity. It's a great program. It's completely free. I'll put a link in the description. You just basically click the recording button, make sure everything's running, start a new recording, then click it again, then come back over here to Vegas and go 3, 2, 1, click play, and start talking. Hey guys, what's going on? Yeah, watch this as I totally just drive up this street here and knock this guy over and then proceed to splatter him. Yes, that kill was hilarious. Hopefully you found that hilarious too, but I certainly did. Anyways, and then basically all you need to do is you just export that audio from Audacity and save it somewhere, and then you just basically drag and drop. And for example, if you needed to adjust your audio levels, which, you know, basically every time I have to, because my voice isn't loud enough or my game's too loud, depends on which way you want to look at it, just drag this volume slider down. I usually use about 25 decibels subtracted on the game and leave my voice audio alone, and that seems to work good, you know, depending on the game. Go ahead and test it out, because obviously you don't want to lose your commentary, you don't want to overpower the game sounds. You want them to blend in a good nice fashion. So that's going to be that in terms of making a commentary. I'll go ahead and delete that. I'll just go ahead and delete this track again because I don't need it. But on for the rendering here. You just file render as, pretty simple. Give your file a name. I'll call this splatter because that guy got splattered and it was pretty hilarious. Render loop region, and I've tried this commentary about 3 times now, and every time I've failed at saying render loop region, which is very difficult to say. Basically, that's just going to render out just what you have selected, what's in between these little yellow triangles and everything, which is really handy if you need to render out a little tiny clip that you plan on using for a montage. Then we'll go into the render settings here. We'll just go and click custom. Right now I'm on the Windows Media Video version 11 file type, which does have some advantages for YouTube. The biggest one that I found is basically that YouTube can process the file as you're uploading the file, which means pretty much as soon as that video is finished uploading, you have 480p video on your channel. And about 5 minutes later, usually there's about 720p video on your channel, rather than, you don't have to worry about that whole, oh, this video is processing, hello 240p, we meet again. You don't have to worry about that. So just make sure you include your audio, unless you don't want your audio, but chances are you want your audio. Video, constant bitrate, CBR. If you wanted to get maximum quality with smallest file type for file size, you can do bitrate variable bit or quality variable bits, which will basically render through your video once, and then it'll do it again to get the basically the still pictures don't need as much bit rates, but if there's a lot of motion, you need more bit rate. But it takes longer to render, and for a commentary, I find that completely unnecessary, because really, again, YouTube's going to mess up the quality anyways, so don't worry too terribly much about it. Video smoothness, 100, sharpest. I haven't seen too terribly much of a difference, but I really only gone from like 84 to 100, so play around with it. But I use 100 and have no issue with it, and it doesn't make too much of a difference. Bitrate is really what's going to determine your quality. Internet to LAN, select an option. I don't think it really matters. I'm pretty sure you could go with high-speed internet and change the settings around and do it that way. But basically 10 million, gonna be 10 megabytes per second basically. That's a good baseline quality. Depending on what you're doing, if you really want to be a quality freak, you could go 12 or 15 million, or 12 or 15 M if you prefer, which will give you a little bit better quality. But again, YouTube's gonna screw it up anyways. So for like a commentary type video or a short little fun video that you're not like expecting people like watch this in 1080p or else just be warned, you don't need to go overboard. You really don't need to go overboard, because usually it doesn't make a difference anyways. As well as keep in mind that these are for 720p. If you wanted to do a larger, if you want to do 1080p basically, you could select a different setting. I could go 1920 by 1080, which is what I play in, and then just make sure that you would need to up your bit rate accordingly, because obviously when you make the frame bigger, when you have a larger image size, that's going to take up more space, so you need to change your bit rate accordingly. I really don't have too many settings for that, because I don't ever render in 1080, because really it's just an extra that you don't need. Nobody really ever watches it except for like montages and everything. I asked my channel a while ago of whether or not I should bump up to 720 or 1080, and most people were like, 720 is fine, doesn't really matter. It doesn't make a difference, to be perfectly honest, because I can't even remember the last time I watched a commentary in 1080p, even if there's an option to. So that's going to be that. Just click OK, and then you just click Save, and then hopefully I'll still be able to record while this is rendering. The render time is going to depend on basically your CPU. I have an i5 2500K at, why did I say K like that? I think about 3.8 right now. I didn't go crazy with the overclock. I don't even know why I did overclock. I really just went with the K just because it's like $10 more at the time, and it's like, well, might as well, because you never know if I'm gonna. But so basically it's just gonna go ahead and render that out. Again, time's gonna depend largely on your CPU and your RAM and what you have going on in the background. Obviously I'm recording a video, so this is going to be taking a little bit longer, but let's just go ahead and let this render out, at least till this guy gets splattered, because like a speed bump. So that's going to be that. If you guys have any questions, let me know down below in the comment section. I'll try and answer any questions that are relevant to anything. I just a quick walkthrough on these two programs. I have used other programs before. I have used MSI Afterburner, and it's not a bad program, but again, Dxtory and Fraps are better, to be perfectly honest. Both of those programs are definitely worth actually buying and not acquiring, I should say, because they're both really good, helpful programs. Even Fraps, even though I don't record in Fraps anymore, it's still a nice thing to have around, because sometimes it just works a little bit better for certain things than other things. So that's going to be that. Ask your questions down below if you have any. Hopefully you guys found this helpful. But that's going to be that. Bye.